welcome to another episode of the Extraordinary Moms Podcast. I'm Jessica Dahlquist, your host, and every Tuesday I interview a different mom who shares their motherhood journey and the lessons they've learned along the way. If I've learned anything from interviewing such a wide range of moms, it's that no two extraordinary moms look the same. We all have a story to tell, and we are all mothering in our own way. So let's celebrate that and learn from one another. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear, please share the show with a friend. Good morning, it's Jessica. How's everybody doing? This is episode 152 of the podcast. I'm so glad to be with you today. Today we have an awesome interview. This is with somebody that I've been following online for quite some time now and have been so impressed by her vulnerability and her ability to connect with her followers through real, everyday mother experience. And that is Julie Lundgreen. You might know her better as So Canary. She is an amazing mom of 3 little ones, 2, 4, and 6. And she's been moving lately and had lots of moving parts. And today we're going to talk about her postpartum depression experience. We're going to talk about how she's coped with the shoulds of motherhood, how she teaches her kids to develop that confidence and not fall prey to the shoulds of what society's telling them they should be. Julie is amazing. I learned so much from her and I really enjoyed our conversation, and I know you will too. So let's get to it with Julie Lundgreen. All right, I want to welcome Julie Lundgreen to the show. Hi, Julie.
Hey,
How's
I'm
it
excited
going?
to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you here. You have just moved recently. Where are you at right now?
We just moved to Hartford, Connecticut area.
That's awesome. How are you liking it so far?
So far, so good. It's a totally different. We're both from the West, so it's totally a new ball game, but we're loving it. We bought our first home and we're settling in, and it's really exciting. So happy to be here.
Good. How has moving been for you? I know that you've made several moves now, as have I, and I've learned a lot from those experiences. And what initially seemed like a reluctant move for me ended up a lot of times being a great experience for myself personally, for our family. How's it been for you?
Yes, I agree with that 100%. It has been probably the biggest growing experience I've had. We moved originally to Ohio, where we didn't know anyone, and just the closeness that it brought to our family, because we had to rely on only each other. We didn't have that friend and family network around. And then also the learning experience of learning to reach out and help others and ask for help when I needed it was huge. It's been really strengthening for our family and for me personally. So I highly recommend it. I think it's the best thing you could do for yourself and your family.
I do too. When we moved to Virginia, I was so reluctant. I didn't want to move. I had my people. I had my stability. Mm-hmm. So why would I want to rock that? But really, the very things and the very weaknesses in ourselves, I think, are the things where life kind of throws those challenges at us that force us out of that comfort zone and force us to address those weaknesses. So I became way more flexible, way more open-minded. I learned how to make friends. In the first, that's an art. Making friends is an art.
Especially as an adult mom, I think.
Yes.
It's really intimidating, but I think it's beautiful. And when you said it opened your mind, I feel like that too. I really learned how to reach outside of my comfort zone and my network and accept new people into my life. And it's beautiful to watch your network grow the way that it does when you have to start over and over and over.
Yes. And it is hard to leave those people that you become so attached to and the places that you love. But there's beauty when you can see the good that came from that one place. You can also anticipate that goodness will come from the next place as well.
Exactly. I think I've been navigating this new place again and feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the level of anonymity and a loneliness almost. The fact that it was so hard for me to leave Ohio gives me hope that in a little bit of time it will be just as hard to leave here if I had to. So
yeah, absolutely. That's really encouraging. So for people that may not know you, I found you online at So Canary, and I just love what you're doing in that online space. But for people that may not be familiar, will you just give a little background on yourself and your family?
Yeah, definitely. So I have 3 children. They're 2, 4, and 6. And I initially began my Instagram account as just sort of my mom account of documenting our daily life. But after going through my first round of postpartum depression, I felt really impressed that I needed to share it. And so I've sort of let my account evolve into more of a public platform to talk about not just postpartum depression, but mental illness of all kinds, and then just personal development and learning to cope with life and the day-to-day struggles that we face in life. and to let them shape you and come out better than you were before, and to learn about ourselves. And I really believe in loving yourself today, but also knowing that you can always do better and be better, and striving for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Why did you name it So Canary? I've always wondered.
That's what everyone asks me. That's the name. The first day I got an iPhone, I just wanted an Instagram account. I was late to the smartphone game, so everyone else had one. And my uncle, who I grew up very, very close with, he's kind of like a second dad to me. He always called me Canary. He said that I was a really pleasant creature as a child. I reminded him of a little happy canary bird. So he always called me Canary. And then as I got older, he started to use it as an adjective. He'd see shoes that he thought I'd like, or any kind of attribute, and he'd say, "Oh, that's just so Canary." And so I kind of adopted that as a personal adjective of my personality.
How endearing.
So Canary.
That is so sweet. Do you have nicknames or pet names for your kids?
Yeah, I think we were just discussing this actually, because we were talking about how they just kind of naturally evolve, and you can't really, when you name a kid, you might think that you're going to call them one thing, but it doesn't really, you have to live it to give it to them.
Sure,
so we call, each one has their own little name, and they've just sort of naturally evolved.
That's so cute. I love that so much. And then sometimes you kind of inadvertently start calling your child a certain name, and it's not even like a cute name, but it just happens, and you're like,
exactly.
Why am I even saying that? But it just comes out.
It just happens.
You're like, how did we get there? And so you did mention that you had some postpartum depression, but let's go back to those early motherhood days for you when you just had your first child. What did you think motherhood was going to be like, and what did it turn out to be for you, Julie?
I didn't go in. I had my first child at 22. I was very young, and I didn't have a lot of expectations. I wasn't someone who grew up just looking forward and longing for motherhood, and so I don't think that I had a lot of expectations attached to it, other than just watching people around me, and they all seemed to enjoy it, and so I just kind of assumed it would be a really joyful, especially the actually having that first baby and holding the baby for the first time. I did have a lot of expectations around that, of a lot of joy and a lot of, happiness. And I just kind of assumed that it would be fine, that everything would be fine, because that's what I saw around me. And I've sort of, everything that I've taken on in life, I've been rather successful at. I mean, that's not to say that I haven't had some fails, but I work hard, and I try to be successful at what I do. So I kind of thought of motherhood as just another role that I would take on and adapt to and find success in. And it turned out to be very different than what I expected. So when I had my first baby, I had a normal pregnancy, and I read some pregnancy books. This was pre-smartphone for me, so I was just getting the books from the library, and I would read up on all of the physical things about pregnancy. And then every time there was a chapter about baby blues or postpartum depression, I would skip it, because to that point in my life, I had been extremely mentally stable, emotionally stable. I'd never struggled really with any kind of serious mental illness or emotional struggle on a serious level. And so I just assumed, oh, that won't affect me, because I don't have those struggles in life. And so I literally skipped the chapter. And then in the delivery room, the moment they handed my son to me, from that very moment, something was off. I didn't feel any of the connection. I didn't feel any flooding of love. I felt nothing. I felt kind of a void of emotion from that very first time that they handed him to me. And then it stayed that way. And the hospital days are sort of a blur, but I remember feeling confused and void of emotion. People would come visit, and I would smile and say, yeah, here's my baby. But I felt like almost an actor living out my own reality. And then the first night we brought him home from the hospital, it was 3 a.m. and I was sitting at the computer in our living room looking through all the pictures that we had taken at the hospital. And I remember so vividly scrolling through the photos and looking at his delivery and looking at all these pictures we had taken of me holding him as a newborn. And I just cried. I was crying and crying, because it was almost like I didn't know what had happened to me. I felt very detached from my life. I felt like I was looking at someone else going through this experience, because I didn't feel any of the emotions. In my head, I knew I loved him, and I didn't have any sort of resentment or anger towards my baby. I knew I loved my baby, but I did not feel the emotions of love. I did not feel the connected feelings that I expected to feel. And that is kind of what triggered that's what began what ended up being about 10 months of really, really intense postpartum depression, that first round for me.
And were you aware at that time of anybody else who had felt similarly? Were you even aware this was a possibility, that you were not going to bond immediately with your baby or could feel that kind of indifference?
No, I just kept, and I remember the main thing that went through my head over and over and over again is, why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't anyone warn me?
The book
that
did,
this might happen?
But you skipped it.
But I skipped it. I skipped that part of the book. But the thing is, what I did know, and so then I started Googling things on PPD, and I feel like we've come so far, even in the 7 years since I had that baby.
Absolutely.
So far. But even when I would Google things, it was, if you hate your baby, or you want to hurt your baby, or you want to hurt yourself, or those sorts of feelings. And I didn't have those feelings. I had no desire to hurt my baby. I didn't want to hurt myself. I didn't hate my baby. So even when I would Google things and read and try to research and go back, because I pulled those books back out and read the baby blues chapters, even those resources didn't identify the way that I felt. They told me, I kind of still thought, well, no, I don't want to hurt my baby, so I don't have this. So that's not what this is. It's not postpartum depression because I don't want to hurt my baby. I don't hate my baby. So it must be something different. And so I still, even when I tried to research it, I didn't identify with the symptoms that they were explaining. And I think that's one of the biggest things with postpartum depression and really mental illness in general. But it can be so different for every single person that it's really hard to give you a list of symptoms and say, do you feel this way? Okay, then this is what you have, because it can affect each person so differently. And even in my experience, I had 2 rounds of it, and my first one looked nothing like my second one. So even when I had the second round of postpartum depression, I wasn't able to quickly identify it because it felt nothing like my first experience with it. And so it's kind of this scary animal that's really hard to diagnose and really hard to understand. And so it makes it really hard for people to understand what's happening to them.
Yes, postpartum depression is not one size fits all. If you ask any 2 people about their experiences with PPD, they are not the same. They may have some similarities, but they do not look the same. And that checklist they hand you at the 6-week appointment, how many people have lied on that thing, right? Like, do you feel sad? Well, yeah, but I'm really sleep deprived. Or, yeah, but it'll get better. Or, like you kind of justify those things. Like, but I'm not that bad. When
exactly.
Really, you may be, and if you're not being completely honest, or even if you are being honest with your reality in that moment, it's not necessarily indicative of the truth of the reality. If someone were to look into your life, they may see something completely different than what you're seeing and experiencing.
Exactly, and I think there is that shame that's attached to it as well. No one wants to say, no, I don't like my baby. No one wants to say, no, I don't feel love for my family. I mean, those aren't things that are really comfortable to admit to anyone,
right.
Especially when you're in the thick of it. I think it's easier once you've kind of come out to say, oh, yes, I was going through that. But when you're in the moment and going through it, it's hard to identify, and it's even harder to admit to yourself and other people.
Yes, because you just want to be that mom that loves her baby, that mom that smiles, that mom that has it all together. Everyone wants that experience, not the, gosh, what's wrong with me? Like, I should be elated.
Exactly. And I think too, in my first round, anger towards my husband was really, really high. I didn't know why, but I hated him. I loved the baby, but I could not deal with my husband. Everything was projected onto him. And so that added to my shame because, marriage troubles are also taboo. And so then I was even more panicked because I thought, well, great. Not only do I not like being a mom and not feel connected to my baby, but also I hate being married and I'm failing in this marriage. And so the compound feelings of that were so deep, and I had no clue that something like postpartum depression could be at the root of my anger because my depression, almost every time, it always manifests itself in a void of emotion. And when I do have emotion, it's anger. So I either feel nothing or I feel angry. And there's not a lot other than those 2 emotions. And so it's just hard because when you hear depression, you think, oh, do you feel sad? Do you feel... No, I would love to feel sad. Now these days when I'm kind of in my recovery from the mental illness journey, it's never healed, but you learn how to cope with it. And I almost get excited now when I feel sad, because it means that I'm feeling a range of emotions other than nothing or anger.
Oh, that's super interesting. Emotions are a critical part of our everyday, right? So if you're happy, that's obviously an ideal type emotion to have. We'd love to feel happy. But just as much, like recognizing and sitting with a feeling of sadness or a feeling of disappointment or a feeling of whatever it is, even if it's a more, quote unquote, negative emotion, the fact that you can feel it at all means that you're human and you're really absorbing the present.
Exactly.
But then
and for
doing
me,
something,
feeling that range of emotions means that I am mentally well. It means that I'm in a good enough place to be experiencing the emotions, and that's exciting. I get excited when I feel sad about things, just because I've spent so many years in that void of feeling nothing, when you'd give anything just to feel something.
Sure. And when you're always feeling the same nothingness, like there's not really room or a path to go down with that. It's just kind of a stunted feeling, right?
Right. And it's really confusing. I think it's extremely confusing. You don't know what to do with it.
Right. With sadness, it's like, okay, I feel sad. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to acknowledge it. But what am I going to do with it? And then there's a place to go or kind of a proactivity that comes.
You can apply coping tools and mechanisms to negative emotion, but it's hard to apply anything to a void of emotion.
Yes. Wow. I have never thought that deeply about that type of concept of the range of emotions. So interesting. And so how long did it take before you actually spoke these words out loud about what you were experiencing, what you were going through, and had it acknowledged for you that, you needed some help?
It was interesting. My sister, who I'm very close with, and she's 9 years older than me. She has 6 children, so she's been around the block a lot more times than I have. But she at the time was living in Australia, and again, 7 years ago. We've come so far in the 7 years, but so communication was really hard. So I didn't get to talk to her much, and she actually came to the States and was at the delivery for my son, but then left 24 hours after he was born. And so she knows me better than anyone, and one day she called my phone 18 times, and I silenced her 18 times, and she never called me. And I just kept silencing her phone because I was in this place where I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't want anyone to know. And I silenced her, and I silenced her, and I silenced her, and she just kept calling. And I finally answered on the last time, and I just started sobbing. And I just said, there's something wrong with me. I hate everything. I'm so angry. I'm not okay. And because she is such a safe place to me, I felt like she was the one person who I was able to just open up to and kind of just say, I don't know what's going on, but I'm not okay. And it was mind-blowing because she said, I've been there. And at the time, she had 4 children. And I'm thinking, you've never told me you were here. You've never spoken a word of this. And so she helped me understand. She validated my feelings, and so I didn't feel so broken. But then that is what triggered my need. I knew that when I got myself out of this, I didn't want one other pregnant person to ever not hear that this was a possibility, because there is no way you should feel after having a baby. Any way you feel is okay. And it's those feelings of, I don't feel the way I should, there's something wrong with me, that encourage silence. And the silence only throws you darker in. So I'm not saying everyone needs to get on Instagram and post about their postpartum depression at all. But they all deserve to feel like whatever they feel after having a baby is okay and acceptable and normal.
Yeah. And like you said, you really looked up to your sister, respected her, and had no idea. And so I just wonder, when she was going through that and had felt those similar type things, if she had said something, if that would have changed her experience for motherhood and would have done anything else for her. But a lot of times, we talk about this a lot on the podcast, giving people the opportunity to go second when we go first, right? And so I think that's what you're doing largely online, is saying, I have a great life. I have beautiful kids. They're healthy. They're happy. I have a great marriage, overall, like these are all in generalities, right? And you might look at me and think, wow, she has a great life. But there's a lot more to a great life than just perfect days. A great life can look like really striving to do your best every day with whatever you've been given, despite whatever mental challenges, despite whatever logistical challenges, financial, whatever it is. That's still a great life, because you're working towards being better the next day and better the next day and always learning and always reaching out to others. And I think that place of support in your online space, I'm sure, and I'm interested to hear the response you've gotten from people, has been really encouraging as people feel then comfortable opening up to you that they can identify and they're so glad somebody else said something.
Exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned by opening my mouth is that I have literally never been alone. There is not one thing that I have ever shared or expressed where I haven't had at least some feedback of me too. And there's just something about knowing that you're not alone and knowing you're not broken. There's not something wrong with you because you feel this way that gives you the power and the peace to seek help and to work on it and to just know that you're okay. You're not broken. You're not wrong. And that was the biggest thing I struggled with is feeling like I shouldn't feel this way. I'm a mom. I'm this baby's mom. I should not feel this way. And there must be something wrong with me. I am broken. I am wrong. And those feelings only feed postpartum depression or any sort of mental illness. Those feelings feed the fire and make it bigger and bigger until it completely consumes you. And so just being able to step out and say, nope, I'm not alone, and I'm not broken, and I'm not wrong, because there's other people who feel the exact same way. And it was shocking to me. The more I opened my mouth, the more I realized not only am I not alone, but there is a huge, huge community of people who are going through this very same thing and need help. And if I have to be the one that exposes my hard feelings to help anyone else, and that's what I say all the time. I think sometimes people who are really open online, people think they do it because we enjoy it or something. And while I enjoy writing and I enjoy sharing, it's not super comfortable to share all of these things. But I do it because if I can help, I remember myself, my 22-year-old self, sitting in my house alone, crying with that baby. And if I could help one person who feels that way that I felt in those days, to let them know that there's nothing wrong with them and that it's going to be okay, then I'll go through whatever I need to. I'll be as vulnerable as I need to, because it's worth helping even that one person.
So I want to point out that you said should a couple times, and this is something that I do and something we've talked about on the show a lot. When we think we should be doing this or we shouldn't be doing this, have the shoulds kind of ruled your life at times, especially as a mom, where you think, I'm doing it wrong and I should be doing something else? Tell me the role that shoulds have played in your life.
Oh, man. I think I was sitting in a college class, and I graduated from college after I had 2 kids. And so I was kind of in a unique position that way. So I was sitting in one of a stress management class in my college courses.
That sounds about right.
And I learned the quote, "Don't should on yourself." And it kind of just stuck in my head, because I do that with everything. Motherhood and nutrition and how clean my house. I mean, everything. Life has these expectations, and we put them on I should be doing this, and I should be doing that, and I should be doing that, and I should be doing it this way, and I should feel this way. And I think it sets up all of these expectations that you're never going to fulfill. And then there's so much shame attached to not fulfilling them. And shoulds have ruled my life, and I've learned so much about letting them go. And that's the biggest thing. And that's one reason I love what you're doing, is teaching women, moms specifically, there's no should. You should not feel any sort of way. You should feel however you feel, and there's nothing else. You have to be free from that and move past that and understand that whatever you're doing and however you're feeling is exactly right and okay, and there are no shoulds.
Yeah, except for you should want to be your best self. You should want to be the best mom you can be, whatever that looks like, and giving ourselves that permission to impose our own shoulds based upon our own values, our own interests of our family. Those are the shoulds.
Exactly. And I think when you really embrace that, it's really a good place to love and accept yourself today exactly as you are, but still feel that excitement and desire and motivation to progress and get a little better each day. Because I think sometimes acceptance gets confused with being stagnant and staying where you are. And you can accept and love yourself today exactly as you are and still be motivated to keep doing better.
Amen. I love that so much. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying my conversation with Julie. Isn't she so amazing? But I wanted to interrupt just for a quick sec to talk about today's show sponsor, which is Prep Dish. How's your summer going? How is your meal planning going? It's not too late to develop a plan of attack if you are struggling in this department. I know that I do. Prep Dish is a healthy, subscription-based meal planning service where you receive an email every week with a grocery list and instructions for prepping healthy meals for your family. With just 1 to 3 hours of prep at the beginning of the week, you have everything prepped for everything you need all week long with delicious recipes like smoky paprika chicken with a trio of roasted vegetables or turkey and zucchini lasagna. I love the creativity, I love the health aspect, and the founder, Allison, is so kind. She wanted to give Extraordinary Moms podcast listeners a free 2-week trial. Just try it out. There's no risk. Go to prepdish.com/em for Extraordinary Moms, and you can try this out for free. There's no risk at all. See if this works for your family. They have gluten-free, paleo options, so if you have dietary restrictions, this might be a great opportunity for you to feed your family some new, unique meals and take that stress off your plate. Thanks, Prep Dish, for sponsoring this episode. And now let's get back to our conversation with Julie Lundgreen. So because of your first postpartum depression episode with your first child, did you kind of go into that second pregnancy worried that those same things were going to resurface, or had you kind of gotten it under control at that point? Where were you at mentally then?
So by the time I got pregnant with my second child, I was well out of the woods. I had worked through my postpartum depression, and the first round lifted pretty naturally at about 10 months. When my baby was 10 months, the cloud, it was very tangible. The cloud sort of left my life, and I felt more normal.
Did you stop nursing, or was there a thing at 10 months that happened, or was it just coincidental that it was 10 months?
I think it was coincidental, and I think sometimes postpartum depression can be that way. It's
Sure.
it can arrive and it can leave,
Yes.
and because there are hormones involved and other things, and I was taking measures to get out of it as well, but I also think that this time kind of helped it. So going to my second round, I was very nervous because I did not want a repeat of the first round. So I kind of, I made a list of things that I felt like maybe made it worse, and then I made a list of things that I could do, or I felt like maybe I could do to cope this next time around. And I also prepared my network of people. Like, if you see these signs, if you see this behavior, please hold an intervention, basically, because I don't know if I'll be able to identify it. And so I felt confident going into my second pregnancy that I had myself equipped to deal with whatever might happen.
Was your husband prepared? Because I know that you targeted him a lot with your anger in that first round. Was he nervous that the wrath was going to return?
I think he felt a lot better knowing that because I was very open with him, and it helped him to understand too that anger that I had towards him was not me. It was the depression. And so once he understood that and knew, I think we both felt confident going in. Well, if it happens again, we'll do something about it. We'll identify it and we'll do something about it. And so I did several things that second pregnancy. Nutrition and exercise are really big for my mental health. So I stayed healthier in that pregnancy, and I also felt like I wanted to be a more active participant in the labor and delivery. My first, I had so many drugs and everything. I felt like, again, I mentioned earlier, that passive victim of the birth almost. I didn't feel like I had anything to do with it. And so I was hoping that maybe if I participated more and was more alert and aware, maybe I could feel that connection more. So I went in with that plan, which of course never works, because birth plans, I swear, never really end up the way that you think they will.
No.
I ended up in emergency induction with my second as well. But so I thought that I prepared myself. I was nervous, but I was cautiously optimistic as well, because I felt like I had tools and knowledge in place to prepare me. And so the second time around, from the very moment they handed her to me, was totally a different story. I felt that connection. I felt that love. I felt the things that I did not feel or experience the first time around, which I was so grateful for, because what a gift to get to experience those. And things went, quote, normal, or as I, quote, should have felt for the first 3 months of her life. It was a completely different ballgame. I didn't have any of the issues that I had with my first. But the interesting thing is, I hit 3 months postpartum, and then postpartum depression hit with that second one.
Interesting.
And it looked totally different and felt totally different than the first round. And So I did not identify it, because even though I had been through it one time, and this is the scariest part of PPD to me, is that even in the same person, it can affect you so differently that you're not able to identify it. So things felt very different the second time around. And so I went another 3 months without even being able to identify. And my husband kept saying, do you think that maybe you're having PPD again? But then I was in such a bad place that I bit his head off for even bringing that up. Like, of course not. This is not anything like it was the first time. So it's totally different. And so that's what's so scary to me, is that I had it before. I had been there before. I had dealt with it before. But because it looked so different and hit at a different time with my second, I still was basically back to square one of having no idea what was happening to me.
And so what did it look like the second time?
I shouldn't say it was nothing like the first time, because there was that anger issue. I have that issue anytime that I have a struggle with depression, but I just felt so much love and so connected to my baby, and I didn't feel that void of emotions like I did the first time. And so I just felt like it was something completely different, because it just didn't feel attached to me having a baby. It just felt like, I don't even know how to explain it. I felt that connection and I felt that love. And so I thought, well, no, because to me, postpartum depression was that void and that disconnect, because that's what it was the first time. And the second time around, it was more of just not being able to handle. I was really easily overwhelmed. I had a lot of anxiety, whereas I didn't really have the anxiety the first time. But the second time, I got really nervous about, I just always thought my children were going to die, or I got very, very, very anxious. And I didn't have that the first time around. And so I just didn't understand it as being the same thing.
That's so interesting. And so you said it took about 3 months again to realize what was quite going on. And so what was the course of treatment or the course of recovery from this version of postpartum depression or anxiety?
So the second time around, I did, once I kind of realized, with the help of my husband and one of my close friends, they lovingly kind of said, like, you're not yourself. You're not acting like you normally do. We're concerned about you. And I kind of realized, so I did go into my doctor and talked with him. And I was close with my doctor, which I think is helpful when you trust your doctor, because you're a lot more comfortable discussing these things. And because I had the first round, at this point, I was a lot more willing. I had already let go of the shame or the fear around admitting it. And so I wasn't so much that. It was more of just, I couldn't even believe it. I couldn't even believe that it was happening again, and that it felt so different and it looked so different. And so I turned to medication the second time around and I got help that way when my baby was about 6 months old.
Yeah. And did any of the coping mechanisms that you learned from the previous time help you this time? And what were some of those coping mechanisms that helped you besides the medication that you chose to take?
So the second round was interesting because I always say depression feeds depression. And what I mean by that is the habits that depression gets you or teaches you sort of feed the depression, and they just make it worse. So
yes, you're depressed about being depressed.
Right.
Yes.
And depression makes it, I mean, it's different for everyone, but this round, it made it really hard to be productive. It made it really hard to want to care for myself in any way, through nutrition or exercise, which the first time around, those were things that really helped pull me out of it. But this time around, I just kind of gave into it more. I kind of leaned into it and let myself lay in bed. I let myself not be productive. I let myself go. And so even with the medication took away the edge, but it didn't cure it because my behavior was not allowing things to change. And so it was this rut that I got in, so that even with the medication, and I think once the actual PPD lifted, my habits were so bad that it kept me in the muck, if that makes sense. It kept me this living kind of a tired, just a blah life, because I'd kind of given in and leaned in and let depression become an excuse for my behaviors. I mean, my behaviors were not great. And when you'd have bad behaviors and bad habits, or poor behaviors, poor habits, it just doesn't cultivate a awesome, motivating, happy, productive life. And so what started out as PPD, that second round, sort of evolved into what ended up being 2 years of darkness and just blah. I know that's not a great word, but just blah. And so I believe that it evolved, and my behaviors are what let it evolve and last as long as it did.
Yes, I think that is so critical when you realize that how you're functioning in your day-to-day life is a result of the habits and the thoughts and those repeated affirmations you've been telling yourself. It is a result of those things. And when you can identify what those things are that are or are not serving you, you can do something about it. Right?
Exactly. And I think it's so important to take responsibility at some point, right?
Yes.
You can't always just say, oh, well, that's how I am, or that's what I'm struggling with. That's fine to identify it, and that gives you tools to cope with it, but you've got to take responsibility and take action, because nothing changes if nothing changes. And so eventually which I've shared before, which is it's hard for me to share this, but I think it's important, is I found out that I was pregnant with my third child. Surprise.
Yeah, hello.
And that was my rock bottom night, because I knew that I could not survive another round of this. I knew I was already in such a bad place because I had let the depression evolve into this bad lifestyle, this dark lifestyle, and I was already so low. And then throwing a pregnancy with my history, my previous 2 pregnancies, the fear of having to endure another round when I was already so low, throwing more PPD on top of it, that was too much. I could not handle it. And that night was the scariest night of my life, and also the turning point. And so then my third pregnancy, I changed my life, essentially.
Right.
I really, and that's kind of when I chose my online platform to really take a personal development spin and to invite other people on my journey of rock bottom and up. So that's still where I'm at. I feel like it's a never-ending journey, and we're just still working on that. So
yeah, and so many people wait until they're out of that in order to reflect and share, right? And that's way easier, right? Like, you're already on the other side of it. So of course you can give the tips and give the encouragement, because you know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, because you're in the light. You've seen that progress. And I think that's so brave of you to start from where you were at that lowest point and share from that space and take people along in that journey. It's just such an interesting, brave perspective to be able to walk that with somebody, because that has got to resonate with so many people who are in the thick of it that say, well, yeah, you're already on the other side of it. Obviously, everything turned out fine and you're healed, but I don't know that it's going to be fine for me. And so that had to be so powerful for people.
I think it's scary to share the journey, because there's that risk of failure. I'm doing okay right now, but if you wait till you're done and you've come out of it, which I think sometimes you need to do. Sometimes,
yes. You
don't have anything to share. You don't have anything to give, because you just need to pull in and focus on getting through it. But I think if you wait till you're through it, it removes all the fear of failure, because you've already done it. Ta-da, look what I did. Look at the process. Here it is. But when you share as you go, it's scary, because you don't know what the end is. But I think it's important to talk about. I where I'm at now is the best place that I've been in the last decade of my life. But that doesn't mean that there's not days. Yesterday, for example, it was a hard day. I was convinced that I sucked and that my life was terrible and everything was awful. And there's still those days. It doesn't matter how far you progress. But I will say the biggest thing when you start to heal and you start to see that light and you start to see what it's like to experience that range of feelings, it gives you something to work for, because you know what it feels like. You know what the light feels like. You know how good things could be. And so really, you can be your own motivation to get you through the hard times. Your own experience is what you need to work for. You're not working for anyone else's destination. You're working for your own destination. And so get a taste of what you want your life to be like and use that as your motivation and your light and what you're going for.
Oh, that is so powerful. That is so beautiful. thank you for sharing that journey, and thank you for being the one to go first, to be brave with that part. So just like we were talking about shoulds with ourselves, you've also talked a little bit lately about your kids and your son in particular, who has faced some bullying and things like that. How are you teaching your kids not to assume those shoulds of what they should be doing, activities they should be doing, the way they should be acting, things like that? How are you empowering them to be confident in who they are and that being enough?
Oh, is that not the hardest part of parenting? I feel like it's so hard. It's so hard not only to teach them that, but to not inflict your own shoulds on them. Because I know whether we want to or not, we all have our expectations of what we want of our children and what we want them to be and what we want them to feel and experience in life. And it is so hard to let go of those and to not inflict them on them, and then to teach them in a world it's so hard, because I tell my son it's okay to be this way, it's okay to do this, but then he goes to school and he doesn't feel like it's okay to be that way because of how he's treated by certain people at school or how he's received by certain things. And I always go back to teaching them, if you're kind, and we do the affirmations every morning. We do the, I am kind, I am smart, I am brave, and I love me. And it's cheesy, but I think it works. I think it works to just kind of have that main thing in their head all day of, I am smart, I am brave, but I'm kind. And with my oldest, when he's gone through these experiences at school, it's a hard balance to teach him to respect himself and stand up for himself, but to also never give in and choose kindness, and never, when they go low, you go high. And I think that's really, really hard. But through the affirmations, I'm big on meditation. I meditate with my kids. We spend quiet time each day. I want them to get to know themselves. I want them to know who they are and to feel confident in that. And when we correct or discipline, my main thing is you are not bad. You are never bad. Maybe that behavior wasn't awesome. Maybe that choice wasn't great, but that does not change your worth. And that's sort of the theme that we always go back to. When they get in trouble or when they do something wrong, I always try to reiterate, your worth is unchanged. You are not bad. You are not wrong. Your choices and behaviors can be off sometimes, and that's okay. We can fix those. We can change those. But your worth stays intact.
Right. And helping them to realize all those kids that are perhaps targeting your son are on that same journey, and they may or may not have a mom that's working on that with them, but realizing we're all just trying to figure this out. We're all doing the best we can with what we know. And so we just want to wrap our kids in bubble wrap, though, don't we? We don't want them to face those challenges, but every challenge that comes to them, especially early on smaller scales, are a chance for them to prove to themselves they can face hard things. They can get through hard things. They can know how to respond in difficult circumstances. And when they do that, gosh, what a sense of confidence that can be fostered in them. But then when it doesn't go well, and when it doesn't go well, it stings, and it stings them and it stings us. I don't know who it's worse for, but we have to let them experience those things, but then also support them and give them the tools to know how to face that when it comes up again, because it'll come up bigger later on.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's important too to let them see our failures. Let them see you work through things. You don't need to be this God of the house who always does things right. When I snap at them or when I do something that I don't like, I sit them down and say, hey, that wasn't cool of me, was it? That was not a great choice that I made. And I think it's important to let them see you work through stuff. You don't need to air your dirty laundry and include things, be age appropriate in what you involve them in. But it's important to say, yeah, I lost my temper and that wasn't the best choice for me right now. And so let's talk through it and let's apologize and teach them how to apologize and how to humbly, admit your mistakes, but then also how to work through it and how to love yourself regardless. And I think just letting them watch that and see that you're human and that's what you're going through teaches them a lot.
Absolutely. And just this morning, my 7-year-old was sassing at me and being so rude. I'm like, you don't talk to me like that. Well, is that really the best answer? So then I backpedaled I corrected myself and I said, actually, you can talk however you want to talk, but you deserve respect from me, and I deserve respect from you. In our family and in our life and in our world, we talk kindly and respectfully to each other. So you do get to choose, and it's not just because I'm your mom and I can talk to you how I want and you can't talk to me how you want. That's not it. And so I did have to kind of explain that rationale to him, and I'm glad I took that time, because I think going forward, it's not just a hierarchy system. You just need to respect your mother. That's not it. It's about respecting all people. And when I am not being respectful to him, I deserve to be called out just the same. And I need to own that. And I think modeling that, we cannot expect our kids to act or speak or believe any differently than we do.
Exactly. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I just feel like we could talk all day, but we are running out of time. But what is the main thing that you've heard from people since you've been so open and vulnerable online? Why are you glad you've been public with your life? And what have you learned over the years from being that vulnerable version of yourself in front of people?
I think that the thing that gives me the most motivation to keep going, because there's a lot of days, like yesterday, I talked about again, like I'm going to delete this account and go into a hole. I don't want to talk about this anymore. But I get messages and feedback from people on a daily basis of, because you shared your story, I was able to get help. And not just that they were brave enough to get help because they didn't feel alone anymore, but I think the more we share our different experiences, like I said, I experienced it two completely different ways, and there are two ways that weren't textbook ways. And so I've had so many people just say, through you sharing, I identified that I needed help, and I was able to go get help, and everything's different now. I feel like by sharing, I've alleviated the length of some people's suffering, and to me that is everything, because you shouldn't go, my first round was 10 months of hell, honestly, and it was no one's fault. It was no one's fault that I didn't know. It was no one's fault, but it keeps me going just to hear the feedback that I don't know how to cure people, I don't know how to cure postpartum depression. I don't know specifically how to help each person, but just by bringing awareness and the conversation to it, it allows them to get the help that they do need. And that help is going to be different for each person and each time you have it. And so that gets tricky. But if by my sharing, you feel more comfortable and a little bit braver and a little bit more okay and not broken and brave, then it's worth it.
And more than the advice that you could ever give people, as good as the advice may be, it's truly the empathy that you can show somebody after going through this walk and identifying with somebody else on that same journey. That's invaluable. That is powerful.
Definitely. And I think the most helpful thing, which I've shared before, but I had one friend in that first round. She would come and sit at my house with me once a week. She would just sit on my couch, and she wouldn't make me talk, and she didn't do anything. She just sat on my couch, and the empathy was there. I felt, I knew I could count on her. She was going to be there. She was going to show up, whether I wanted her there or not, and she'd hold my baby, and she'd sit on my couch, and we don't always need to make it okay. We don't need to fix other people. We just need to be with them and to be there for them, and to be open to being whatever you need to be for that person. Just offering yourself and your love and your empathy, I think, is the best thing you can do, because you can't fix everything. And I think sometimes it's we want to fix it to make ourselves more comfortable. And sometimes you just need to have the empathy and to sit with it, with the person.
Yeah. Julie, I think you're such an extraordinary mom, and that is because extraordinary moms truly just want to be the most healthy, whole, happy versions of themselves. That is when you can show up best for your kids. And I see you doing that online, and I am so inspired by that. So thank you. Thank you for offering that to me and to all of your followers.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved being here. I love what you're doing. And seriously, it's just an honor to get to chat with you. So I appreciate it.
Thanks. Where can people find you online?
I'm So Canary over on Instagram, and actually my blog is under repair, so that's about the only place you can find me right now. So Canary on Instagram and Julie Lundgreen on YouTube.
Okay, but if we follow along on your Instagram, you'll let us know when it's not under construction.
I'll let you know. My whole life is in a shambles right now, but we're getting it put back together, so we'll be back soon.
That website's a metaphor for life, isn't it?
Yes.
I love it. Well, Julie, I always ask my guests one final question, and it's this. What would you tell your pre-motherhood self?
Don't try so hard to return to normal, because motherhood is meant to change you. So accept the new normal.
I love that. I love that so much. Julie, you're awesome. Good luck settling into your new home, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
You too.
Wasn't that an amazing conversation with Julie? Whether or not you've been through postpartum depression or any type of mental health illness, I learned so much from her, and her perspective is so wise, and I just love seeing the progress and the process of her journey. It was just a great conversation, so thanks for being on the show, Julie. You can follow me if you aren't already on Instagram at Jessica Dahlquist3 or on Facebook at Extraordinary Moms Podcast, and everything we talked about today, all links to how to find Julie, pics of her cute family, will be on extraordinarymomspodcast.com. You could head over there, and if you're newer, you can dip back into the archives and check out past episodes. It is our Mom of the Month episode coming up this Friday, so if you haven't already nominated, head over to my Instagram at Jessica Dahlquist3, and you can nominate an extraordinary mom that you know that you'd like to highlight. Tell me what makes them extraordinary. I pick a winner and interview them for Friday's episode. And excitedly, Prep Dish will be sponsoring again, so the nominator and the nominee will win a Prep Dish subscription, and I know that you want help with those meal planning services. So definitely reach out and nominate and tell me who you think is an extraordinary mom in your life. I hope you have an awesome week, everybody, and we'll see you on Friday and next week for another episode with another extraordinary mom. Bye.